We are just hours away from another round of tariffs imposed by Donald Trump. Dubbing it Liberation Day, the U.S. president is set to announce tomorrow afternoon sweeping tariffs on most imports to the United States. It has many in Canada preparing for the worst. As Greg Ross reports, the city of Toronto already has a plan in place to deal with the potential impacts.
The U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods will impact Toronto businesses.
Mayor Olivia Chow was at Yaya Foods in Etobicoke, a company that relies on trade with its partners south of the border.
They employed over 1,000 people here in Toronto, and 90% of their products are shipped to the United States.
There could be some tough times ahead for businesses like Yaya Foods, but we still don't know how far-reaching the impact will be. President Trump has been threatening tariffs for months, and it's hard to say if this time around they'll stick.
That kind of uncertainty, that deep, profound, far-reaching uncertainty can, on its own, throw the economy into a recession because investments are being postponed, business plans are being put on the back burner, major consumer purchases are being put off.
Toronto is already taking steps to try and soften the blow.
At Council last week, on Thursday, we passed our economic action plan to build a more resilient local economy. The City of Toronto is going to buy Canadian, support local industries, and we've launched our Love Local campaign to boost local businesses.
Many Torontonians didn't wait for this latest round of tariffs to change their shopping habits.
Buy Canadian. 100%.
I try to do that as much as I can. I do look for the Canadian flag. I'll try to buy produce that isn't from the U.S.
Some will even pay more in order to avoid U.S. products.
A couple of days ago, I went to get strawberries for my daughter. The American strawberries were $3.99. The organic Mexican strawberries were $8.99. I bought the organic Mexican. I will not buy American under any circumstance unless it's the only option.
The shift in shopping habits may help the Canadian economy, but it's only a small part of the overall solution.
Those individual consumer choices, make an incremental difference. But we're going to need a much more powerful and I think a deep-rooted response to Mr. Trump's actions. We're going to have to find ways to reorient the whole direction of our industry to sell more stuff in Canada and more stuff to other world markets, Europe and Asia and so on.
In the meantime, many businesses are bracing for what could be coming from the U.S. president Wednesday. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's rocky relationship with the U.S. in recent months has some Canadians opting not to travel south, many fearing difficulties at the border given recent stories of people being detained. Lorena Redekop takes a look at the changing travel advice.
Even utilizing a court.
Immigration lawyer Heather Siegel says during her 30 years in practice, she's never experienced a time quite like this.
There is just tremendous fear.
She's hearing from Americans, Canadians, and permanent residents, many worried about social media posts or messages being misinterpreted.
I think it is a great idea to take a burner phone, to not take your technology, to not take anything on your technology that you would be afraid of any government entity knowing or having.
Border guards have always had the power to check devices, but now people are hearing more stories about extra questioning or travelers being detained, like one BC woman who'd been working in the U.S., held in detention for more than a week after crossing from Mexico. For people flying into the U.S. from Canada, Siegel recommends clearing customs on this side of the border. In Toronto, that means leaving from Pearson, not the island airport downtown.
Might you be detained at the airport? You might be detained for questioning, but you can say at any point, you know what, I don't want to travel anymore.
The worries are heightened for some people, with the Trump administration considering a travel ban for people from some countries, including Iran. It's a community Atlas Travel specializes in serving.
I can say like it has been maybe to zero last 4 weeks that we haven't even sold one single ticket to U.S. Or either transiting through the U.S.
She says clients are shelling out hundreds of dollars more per ticket to avoid a U.S. stopover. If they do fly south of the border now, she recommends arriving extra early.
Have extra document that shows that you are working here, you have houses here, some extra document on top of your Canadian passport.
Siegel says another group that's worried, those who are transgender.
They're terrified to travel on government-issued documents that have X's on them because they're no longer recognized.
She's even hearing from other lawyers, also worried, in part due to a presidential memo, raising concerns about immigration lawyers. Her take?
It's truly Orwellian. It really is. It's doublespeak everywhere.
But at this point, there haven't been any legal changes by the U.S. The government of Canada has also not amended its security advice for U.S. travel, apart from those staying more than a month, who now need to register. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
Peel police are searching for suspects tonight after a man was shot and killed in a busy plaza in Brampton in broad daylight. It happened in the area of Bramalea Road and Dewside Drive this afternoon. Police say they believe the incident is isolated, and JP Gallardo reports they're appealing to the public for help.
This busy plaza, lined with several businesses and packed with cars, was the scene of a brazen shooting just after 1 this afternoon.
Our 21 Division patrol officers arrived on scene and located a victim who was suffering from obvious signs of trauma. The officers attempted to render CPR to the victim. However, he unfortunately succumbed to his injuries and was later pronounced deceased here at the scene.
Investigators say the man was shot inside of a car in the parking lot. Those suspects fled the scene before officers arrived. Tony Jahal has owned a restaurant in the plaza for 15 years. He says he knew the victim and his family.
I know his mom and dad. Young man is gone like a son, and he's a lone son in the family. And his mom and dad very hard, But Jack is a nice guy. I always saw him every day here. He was barking with the dog, running around every day, morning, afternoon, because he has a shop in the corner over there, the vape shop. And plus, I think he's doing the truck dispatching, and he got a driving truck school, something like that.
This man, who lives 10 minutes from the plaza, says he's shocked something so violent happened there.
It's a very family-oriented plaza. A lot of kids do come to this place. So it's quite a busy spot, and something happening like that in Brampton, it seems very shocking right now.
Amandeep Judge is the federal conservative candidate in the riding of Brampton North Caledon. He and a group of volunteers were door knocking in the area shortly before the incident.
This is very sad, and even this happens during the daytime. So this is not the Canada we want.
Police say they believe the shooting was targeted and are assuring residents they are safe.
What's happened here is very unfortunate, but we can reassure the public that we're doing everything in our power, and we're looking to hold those responsible, hold those accountable that are responsible for this incident.
Now, police aren't providing many more details about the victim or potential suspect, and at this time, they are appealing to the public to provide any sort of video surveillance footage or dashcam footage to help solve this case. JP Gallardo, CBC News, Brampton.
An inmate at the Toronto South Detention Centre is facing a second-degree murder charge after the death of another inmate who died following an alleged assault last week. Police were first called to the jail last Monday at around 6 p.m. They say the 27-year-old victim was assaulted by another inmate and taken to hospital in critical condition. Police say he died in hospital later in the week. The alleged attacker was originally charged with aggravated assault, but those charges have now been upgraded. This is Toronto's 8th homicide of the year. 3 people, including a child, were rushed to hospital after a crash in Brampton this morning. It happened near Torbram Road and Queen Street East just after 6 a.m. One of the adults was taken to a trauma center, though police later said all the injuries were non-life-threatening. The child was transferred to Sick Kids Hospital in serious condition. The cause of the crash is still under investigation. Well, if you filled up your tank today, you likely notice a big dip in gas prices. It comes as the consumer carbon tax is eliminated, but experts say that won't mean the end of the discussion around the controversial tax. Tyler Cheese has more.
It's really good. It's really helpful, especially people who do Uber. It's like a good saving.
Drivers are happy to see gas prices down around 20 cents a liter all over the GTA. but some are left with questions about the lifting of the carbon tax.
I commute down from North York every day, so cheaper gas prices are good for me. However, saying that, I still believe that we do need to have a carbon tax.
Gas analysts confirm the decrease in price here in Ontario is largely due to the end of the consumer carbon tax, but they warn the dip could be short-lived.
Already up. Tomorrow we see a 2-cent increase, as does gaswizard.ca, my other site. We then see a 7-cent increase, not this weekend, but the following weekend, heading up to April 15th. That's the seasonal switchover from winter to summer gasoline. So the 136 we're seeing in the GTA, or a little lower across the province, will likely look a lot closer to $1.45, maybe $1.46, with $1.50 likely by the May 24 weekend.
Ending the carbon tax was one of Mark Carney's first acts as Prime Minister. Some experts say it's a bad move and the tax is necessary for cutting emissions.
There's no way around reducing emissions if it's not expensive to consumer products that entail carbon emissions. You've got to make those things more expensive, both because people would consume less of that. That's number one. Two, because it also sends a signal to producers that they should find alternatives.
But others support the end of the carbon tax, saying the government should instead focus on alternative investments itself.
Years of infrastructure that is likely going to become obsolete much before then. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do. We just need to shift the conversation away from this idea of, oh, well, we have to focus on pricing carbon and focus on emissions, and more on how we're going to restructure our economy in ways that cares for people and tackles income inequality and the justice issues that we're facing in Canada today.
She says making proper investments in things like healthcare and public transit helps to improve the average socioeconomic status and in turn will reduce emissions and over-reliance on fossil fuels. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
More than 250,000 homes and businesses are still without power after a weekend ice storm. Hydro One is calling it the most devastating in decades, with impacted areas bracing for even more freezing rain expected tomorrow. Dale Manukduk has this story.
Gregory Jeeves is sawing through the tree trunks and branches in the backyard of his family's home in Fenelon Falls. It and other homes hit hard by last weekend's ice storm. Dozens of trees along the street came crashing down, including on a couple of power lines.
I have a big bruise on my shoulder from a piece of ice just dropping over the tree. And you'd hear it rattle, and it's almost like an earthquake, and then the tree would come down to the ground.
The home is running on a generator, powered by these large propane tanks. The family was lucky to get one since the local depot is out of power.
If we run out of propane, we can't run the generator, we can't operate the sump pump, everything in the freezer goes bad.
Over at a local community center, the mayor helps a resident who lives off of a well load gallons of drinking water into his truck. The center is serving as a warming center for those who need it during the day. Monday night, Kawartha Lakes declared a state of emergency.
Focus right now is trying to get that power back. Also to make sure we get all our roads cleared where we have downed trees.
The storm ripped through central and eastern Ontario. Fenelon Falls, Peterborough, Orillia, and parts of the Muskokas were the hardest hit. Crews have restored power to over 650,000 customers, with about 270,000 still in the dark.
We really appreciate our customers' patience. We know this is not the news anyone wants to hear at this time. This is the most devastating storm we have seen since the 1998 ice storm.
Ontario's emergency management team has been in contact with impacted communities and deployed resources.
And we've deployed Ontario Corps. I want to thank our partners for providing critical resources like generators here.
Jeeves wants more than Ontario Corps. She wants the Army called in for emergency assistance.
I don't know how that would help. I think what we need to get the power back.
Hydro One says power restoration efforts will go into the later part of the week. It could be more complicated as there are freezing rain warnings for the areas already impacted. The mayor of Kawartha Lakes says the city is also struggling with Wi-Fi and connectivity, making it more difficult for first responders in the event of an emergency. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Fenelon Falls.
Welcome back. The province says 9 of its heart hubs to aid those struggling with addiction open today. This following passage of a law closing numerous supervised consumption sites. The move marks a shift from harm reduction to treatment. But critics say Ontario's new approach may be off to a bumpy start. Provincial Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords has this story.
All that I would ask is encourage all Torontonians
to learn about how to recognize an overdose.
The candid advice of Toronto's acting medical officer of health as the city transitions away from supervised consumption sites. Dr. Lamptey says the overdose epidemic continues to claim lives across the city and province.
Please access our website to learn about how you can get trained to be able to administer naloxone.
That comes as the province closes 9 supervised consumption sites, shifting them to a new model of care focused on treatment and not harm reduction. Only one of the 10 sites slated for closure is poised to stay open in its current capacity. Toronto Board of Health Chair Chris Moy says it's a difficult day for many in the community who supported harm reduction. On Friday, a court injunction allowed the safe consumption sites to remain open, but finances don't allow it for many, he says.
Unfortunately, many sites are unable to stay open because they relied on provincial funding and were approved for Heart Hub funding, which prevents the co-location of the services.
And he acknowledged the rollout has not been seamless, with the city offering some, but not all of its intended programming for its Heart Hub on day one.
There is progress, right? I mean, ideally, it'd be nice to actually have this all rolled out on April 1st in a smooth manner, but nothing in life is, linear.
The executive director of the East Toronto Heart Hub called today a soft launch, getting staff up to speed with local partners and settling into the new space.
We're available for service now. My expectation is that within the next 2 weeks, we'll have a good portion of the staff team and be able to, spread the news a little bit more broadly.
But harm reduction worker Zoe Dodd disputes the government's claims that the sites are open and operational. She says this shift to a different model was unnecessary and will lead to needless deaths.
Dead people don't make it to a systems navigator or an outreach worker. This is not what these services provided. These services provided are not being replaced or replicated. So we have sites that, for 5 years had reversed over 20,000 overdoses. We know that more people will overdose. We know more people will overdose and die.
The province says in a statement today that it has confirmed all 9 Heart Hubs across Ontario are open, and it has flowed funding to them. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
One of the tiny homes in St. James Park near King and Jarvis was ordered to be removed by the city this morning after the occupant of the unit was given a trespass notice.
These were always meant to be transitional. They were not meant to be permanent. They were meant to transition people into housing. We got no problem with removing the units, but the people need places to go. So we just need to make sure that everyone has a place to go, and then we're more than willing to remove the units.
The founder of Tiny Tiny Homes says he had planned to provide that space for someone else in need, as the occupant of that unit was set to move into a new apartment. 3 of the 5 homes now remain at the park. Ryan says the plan is for all of them to eventually be removed once the residents find permanent housing. The nonprofit organization was given a cease and desist letter back in February with an order for all of the homes to be removed. But Mayor Olivia Chow intervened, allowing them to remain through the cold temperatures. Ryan says he is working with the city to get the remaining occupants permanent housing, and that he plans to provide more shelter spaces in a private location in the future. Ontario is raising the minimum wage. The province announcing it will be increasing it to $17.60 an hour beginning October 1st. Now that is a 40-cent bump from the current $17.20 and around an $800 annual increase for those working full-time hours. This will make Ontario's minimum wage the second highest in Canada behind British Columbia. Today's announcement comes just 6 months after the last increase took effect. The province saying it is needed to combat the rising cost of living. Ontario's minimum wage has increased $14 over the last 7 years. All right, Colette joins us now with a check on the forecast. And Colette, it feels like winter isn't done with us just yet. Some more freezing rain on the way.
Yes, here it is, a very active spring, although we're not that far into the season, right? Another system coming in and yet another system with that risk of freezing rain. So we do have a freezing rain warning into many of the areas hit so hard on the weekend. Saving grace perhaps in here is that this will be shorter lived, a couple of hours as opposed to a couple of days in terms of the duration. But this is really kind of into tomorrow afternoon as the system is working its way in. A little bit of wet snow or mixing with ice pellets, then that freezing rain. And elsewhere, like into the GTA, special weather statement here for the city of Toronto, because we could get a little freezing rain too, not so much close to the lakeshore, but elsewhere. But it should be very brief before it changes over to rain as the temperature rises. And not only that, but we have to think about rainfall warnings, which we also have, where we're looking at 30 to 50 millimeters of rain, especially with the risk of some thunderstorms by tomorrow evening. So many things going on. Let me time it all out for you. The increase in cloudiness tonight. This would be a little bit of light, wet snow, which would be brief into the city, and that's in the morning hours. Otherwise, in the morning, the rain and wet weather is really in southwestern Ontario. But watch how this expands. Now, one of the areas that could see the prolonged freezing rain, or at least more of a buildup, that ice accretion close to 10 millimeters possibly, would be around the Niagara Escarpment. So that is the risk there. But also those areas that had the freezing rain and still have power outages, that coming into in the evening hours there, right through that region, Barrie, Aurelia, over towards Peterborough. You can see how it's rained there into the evening for the GTA. May get a little bit of a brief pause in that, and then heavier rain in the overnight with that risk of some embedded thunderstorms. So locally, we could have some of those heavier amounts of rainfall. Windy conditions with this too, especially by the time we get to Thursday morning. That's going to keep pushing that temperature up. So very mild on Thursday and clearing, but you got to contend with those winds. There's that area I was mentioning where we could see more significant ice accretion. Elsewhere, it's more like 2 to 4 millimeters. I know there are areas you don't need any more. And rainfall amounts more in that 30 range for Toronto, but potentially Barrie up to 60 millimeters. And you add in the winds with that, and we really could see some problems there with some of those vulnerable tree limbs that we already have and power lines. There are those winds, maybe over 60 kilometers an hour, some of the gusts. -1 tonight. And this is what I'm talking about with those temperatures continuing to rise as we head into Thursday.
Thanks so much, Colette. And that's our show for you tonight. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.